Well, I'm happy to say I'm with a very old and dear friend, Paul Connolly. He's going to talk to us about his early life. Paul, born in 1953, I think. He lived in rural, what was then Rhodesia, most of his early life, and then also went to Plumtree, along with a lot of illustrious Rhodesians, now Zimbabweans. But Paul, I know your dad became a very senior and important member of the Rhodesian government. Just tell us a bit about him, how he got to where he was, and his involvement.
Yeah, it's interesting because he did become very senior. He became secretary of what was still then called Internal Affairs, subsequently Home Affairs.
And before that, the Native Department.
It was then the Native Department.
Yeah.
But he was not a Rhodesian Front supporter, Hannes. He was, by the standards of the day, particularly within government, very liberal. But he had such an integrity and did his job with such honesty and diligence that they realized the quality of my father. So he, in fact, faced this kind of dichotomy where he became the secretary of a ministry, was on the national jock, and yet was very reluctant to see his two sons go into the army. But of course he knew, a bit like Kipling, wasn't it? Kipling never wanted his son to go into the trenches of the First World War.
Because your dad probably wasn't sure that the war needed to be fought.
He believed for quite a long time before 1980 that it was pretty much a lost cause.
It was avoidable.
It was avoidable, but he had a deep sense of loyalty, and he would not have argued vociferously against his superiors.
Yes.
He would have made statements, as he did actually, even during his time as a district commissioner. He tried to oppose the taking of land that he believed should have remained in the hands of Africans. And he was overruled every time. I think that may have sort of engendered a bit of a lack of support, I suppose, for the government. But he was good at his job, and that's why he was.
Paul, just been going a bit ahead of ourselves, we'll come back, but he was not a Rhodesia Front supporter. But he did end up holding Ian Smith in high regard as a man.
He did.
Am I right?
He did. He did not initially, and we would discuss it. And I would say, I think you're wrong. I think Smith is a fine leader. He lacks self-importance, and that's, to me, a great asset, to lack self-importance. We wouldn't argue it, but we kind of agreed to disagree.
Yeah.
And it was later that he said to me that he felt he was wrong, that he felt that Smith was a fine man with integrity and a good leader. Whether he made the wrong political decisions, another story. That was another story. I remember Hannes, the sort of simpleness in the best way of Smith was once, when I was in the army, he met me, he flew in to a little airfield with a very small entourage. He flew the plane in himself. A small entourage, I think 3 guys. I had my platoon lined up to greet him. He bothered to know what my name was. He went down the line shaking hands, asked me if I wanted to read the day's paper. Years later, somebody asked me if I could provide Ian Smith's address. It was this person from Scotland, and I said, look, I will, provided Smith agrees. I must phone him, I can't just give out his address. I phoned him, and I said, Mr. Smith, you'd have no idea who I am. But my name is Paul Connolly. Perhaps there was another connection. And I said, I met you. He said, I know where I met you. I met you at the airstrip when I landed on such and such a time. Me, second lieutenant. He could remember that. Hey, that's a leader. That's a leader.
Yeah, and a very humble man.
Humble man.
Paul, I know you don't want to talk about it, but you were a hell of an athlete. And I know athletics was a big part of your life. I think you still hold a record at Plumtree when I last checked.
You checked a long time ago there, Hannes. I think that was a record win. Yeah, look, it was a big part of my life. Even at university, so I went to universities.
So yeah, you went to university. Yeah. One of the reasons being you wanted to train for the Olympics.
When it got to the postgrad, I realized Montreal Olympics was potentially there. I was then running well. So I ran well at school, and I was certainly the fastest in Mdala.
You were going for 800?
800, but there were two guys. There was John Calderwood and a wonderful bloke called Peter Bauer.
Yes.
Peter Bauer,
yeah.
Who was the fastest, I think, between him and Calderwood.
He was killed.
He was killed.
Yeah.
But I was a late developer, and so I wasn't in their league, but I was comfortably under 2 minutes, and they were like 250, but they were 156 around there. So so then when I realized I was becoming a good runner, I thought I'll do the postgrad, the LLB, only to see if I could qualify for the Montreal Olympics. I've got to say I was confident. It was a blistering a speed, a time one had to get, but I was confident. I'll never say I'd qualified, because I didn't, because we were boycotted. Finally, 2 weeks. Rhodesia was going, it wasn't going. It was going, it wasn't going. And then finally, we got the message, Rhodesia is boycotted, it's not going to.
And the New Zealanders were a big player.
New Zealanders led it. Peter Hain, you will remember from those days,
well.
And the New Zealanders led the move against Rhodesia going because of the political situation.
Rhodesia was kicked out.
Rhodesia was kicked out. Incredibly, a team did go without me, because by then I'd volunteered to go to the army. By then I just abandoned the LLB and thought I'm not interested actually in doing the LLB. So I volunteered to go into the army, by which time. But here's the thing, Hannes. I was also, by the standard of the day, quite liberal-minded, and I could fully understand the other side's cause, its reasoning. I could completely accept and understand that. I didn't go into the army for any ideological reason. I went in for a purely selfish reason. I wanted to know what it was like to be involved in a guerrilla war, genuine guerrilla war, at the age of 21. It was entirely selfish. There was no ideology involved. But it was, to me, it was an experience. I thought, I've got to have this experience and be paid, admittedly peanuts, but be paid for doing it. So
Paul, you got onto an officer's course?
Yeah. Got commissioned.
How many of you were commissioned out of the intake?
Well, we were an unimpressive course, Hannes. The intake was huge. It was a double intake. I seem to remember it was 460. Intake 149. It's 146. We were doubled up in our national service time. And 4 of us were commissioned. 4 of us were commissioned. Yep. Yeah.
Who were your instructors? Peter Heen?
Peter Heen and Thackwell.
Thackeray.
Lou Thackeray.
Lou Thackeray. And Lou Hallamore.
No, it was also Lou Thackeray.
Okay.
I had such respect for that guy. I had such respect for Lou Thackeray. He was an amazing individual. That.
And then after the course, you wanted to go to the SAS?
Even during the course, what I really would, again, just because of the experience, to me, the top units, and I will insult some people in the country, the top units were SAS and RLI. To me, that's my personal view. Okay, there are others who disagree, and I'll listen to them and whatever. So I'd always want to, again, just from the point of view of experience, to be with SAS. We were so short of seconds, so I went to Peter Heen, who was the course officer. Immediately I got no. Even when the officer's course started, I said I'd like to do the SA selection, if I may. He said yes. Nothing will stop you doing that, but go through the course. Whether you get commissioned or not, you will always have the right to go join the SAS. So I did get commissioned, went in and was prepared to hand in my commission, said, please, I'd like to go and do the SA selection. I have no idea whether I would have failed it or passed it, Hannes, and I will never, ever think, of course I would have passed it, no way. But he said, look, we're very short of second lieutenants now in the field because they were being killed. As soon as we have enough second lieutenants, we'll release you to go and do the SS selection, see if you can make it. We remained short of second lieutenants, so I was never released. Never, no.
And you were posted to?
So we were posted to, first of all, 1 Indep, which was Wankie, then moved to 4 Indep, spent some time there in Hurricane as Fire Force, which you would know way better than me. But you know, in those days, yes, you had a base, but you didn't spend much time at the base. You were all over the country. So we were in Hurricane for some of the time, and then I forget the operational area of Kariba. Tangent was it? Wasn't Tangent. Tangent. I forget what that was. Repulse or something.
And Paul, your brother Kevin, he went off to he went off to the police.
Yep.
He was in police anti-terrorist unit.
Yep.
Part 2. And tell us about what happened there.
So he was an artist. He was just a lovely, gentle individual. He was fit, he was strong, he was about 6'1" and lean. And he didn't like the war, Hannes. He hated politics. He was the most non-judgmental person I've ever known in my life. And but he thought, hey, I've got to do my duty. My family, my younger brother being me, was all gung-ho. So he felt he had to do his duty. And it was the very last night of his national service that he was ambushed and killed with 4 others. So there were 5 of them killed. That next day they were due to demob, and he was going on. The last day, yeah. So he was killed in ambush.
And where were you now, Tom? Tell us about where were you when this happened.
So at the time, I was also on a follow-up more in the Wangie area, sort of around about Kamativi, tin mine, around about that area. It's impossible, that area. So, and then the follow-up came to nothing. I was called back to our base, and the course officer there said, I've got some news for you. You know, these things Hannes, instinctively, sort of viscerally, I said, I know what you're going to tell me. And he said, okay, what do you want to do? And so I said, look, maybe we've got time. Fly me to the area close to where there's the closest landing area.
So he told you Kevin had been killed?
Yeah, he did.
Right.
So let me pick my men, and we'll go on the follow-up. So he said, for sure. They laid on a plane. We went there, not helicopters. It was an islander. We went there. Got there too late. I was briefed by Johnny Johnson, who was the head cop there at the time. And we were too late to follow up on land. It was too late in the day. But what Johnny suspected is that this group would try and, because they killed 5 Rhodesian security forces in ambush, they would try and go back to Zambia for a while to, let the dust settle. And he thought they might try and cross a Chetty Gorge, which is a very, very narrow part of the lake. And so I climbed on 2 police Part 2 boats. They were equipped with twin Brownings, I seem to remember, and go and patrol the gorge all night to see if these guys try and cross. So we did. And then at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the ferry, called the Sea Lion, started coming through the gorge, and the 2 boat commanders said, well, we better accompany the ferry through. And we did, going slowly, and about 3 o'clock in the morning or something, all hell broke loose. These guys had come back. It was their intention to cross, and they just opened fire on us. Of course, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, pitch black, nobody can see anything, just traces around, bullets smacking everywhere. The 2 police guys on the twin Brownings were just going mad on these twin Brownings, just firing into the bush on the Rhodesian side. And then the ferry in front of us, a South African tourist reacted quickly and rushed out onto the deck where most people would sleep. And he said, come back, get back, and we're under fire. And he was hit. He took a bullet through the left there, out the right, and died. We accompanied the ferry into Binga. The ferry then stopped until, you will remember, till the war ended. The ferry never ran again after that. And then I was called back. Well, we were back then, and I was called out because I was not emotionally capable of leading a follow-up, you know, against obviously some pretty effective.
Your father actually intervened at that point, didn't he?
Yeah, my father intervened. He got hold of the general of the army and said, please pull Paul out because he's not going to lead this follow-up very well.
Sensibly.
Very sensibly. And that would not have been a good result. I know there was a follow-up, Hannes, but it had nothing to do with me. Yeah.
Who were the other guys that were killed with Kevin?
Hey, man, I forget their names now. I know Larry, I do forget their names.
There's a few black guys.
2 black guys and 3 white guys, yeah.
Paul, Larry Norton, tell us about the time, how it happened. You were with your late wife, Marie?
Yeah. So I was with Marie in about 5 years ago, and I'd said to her, look, there's a place that I want to visit again. Because the last time I was there was in 1968 with my brother. And I just want to see what it's like now. And Marie said, hey, let's go. And we went there, and the emotions were powerful. Anyway, I got back here and phoned Larry the next day and said, geez, Larry, I've got to tell you, man, I went back to a place that I was last there in 1968, and I just started speaking to him about the sort of thoughts that were going through my head without me knowing. Larry was making notes, and Larry wrote this poem. It's rough, it's raw, it's unsculpted, which is the way it should be. There's no iambic pentameter or anything else one expects in a poem. But it says what we were all feeling, because those hey, listen, the days became better afterwards, Hannes, didn't they? Straight after Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. I mean, we then went into a world of just sort of like paradise day after day after day, you know, with the lives we led. So,
read us the poem, Paul. Okay.
It's rough, and it's Larry's simply putting into words what I was saying to him that next day. A breeze blew in, and it blew in the most indescribable memories and the sadness, and I had to go. The last time I was there was in 1968 with Kev. Yesterday I received photographs. There were 5 of us. It was 1971 at Kev police station, pulling faces. But of the 5 of us, 3 are now dead. 2 killed in the war, 1 killed on a motorbike on the tree behind. When the wind blew, it blew in nostalgic memories of 1968 to 1978. That was the world he belonged to. We had stopped under a beautiful tree to have lunch. And it was just us, hey? And I said to Marie, we have to leave. Memories are never a memory of a single event. It was a memory of that whole time. Smell, times, romance. Memories of another era and frame of mind. Joy, lightness. That breeze carried with it every event. That time, the atmosphere, the moods. I can remember sitting side by side with my brother with a book on the Serengeti, balanced on our bony knees, and our minds would transcend to another place. When you go back to 1968, the world is a very romantic place. At 16, the world is an enormous place. Incredibly, a guy called Rob Bresler, a voice from the past, called. Nice thing about it, I phoned my mum to tell her about it. The beauty of it is that you can share those memories. We can go there. Claire, my second born, would have stood there and felt the breeze. and would have felt, I know what is going on here. 1968 just blew in on the breeze. The old game scout at Nantwich, he kept on saying, I remember those days, I remember those days. Ishe, I remember those days. He had one of those faces, the sort of guy the old National Parks officer would have said, Udara, get mpupu, nerelesh nenyama. We are going out for 2 weeks. Well done, Larry.
Paul, on the back of that poem, the great Larry Norton has done a painting, and I think it's a good time to bring Larry into the conversation. Tell us about the painting, Larry.
Sit there, Larry.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, Hannes. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Larry.
What a,
Another story.
yeah.
Just tell us about how the painting,
So,
the background. And
Yeah, I think the subject was something, I was at school during the war, and I think for me, we had grown up in a farming area in Mvukwi's, now in Mvurwi, and generations of our seniors and stuff went through the army. There were I was at Prince Edward School, and there were often roll calls. There were a lot of guys killed and wounded, and so we were very aware that in those war years we were being protected and looked after. And I think for me, I've always felt a debt of gratitude to all those who served and gave so much. I didn't feel qualified to paint a wall painting, but not so long ago someone came to me and asked me if I would do it. And I've been doing quite a few historical paintings and landscape work on this country, and I thought, yeah, this is the time. And so I said, yeah, I would like to paint it, and there's a way that I would like to paint it. And I then proceeded to sketch it out, and I think because the battle in this country has always been about the land and the soul of the land, I chose an area that for me was one of the most evocative places, and that's looking down from Marangora towards the Zambezi River. From that high ground you look down, and at that very poignant time of year, September, October, when there's a haze and it's dry, and I thought for all of us in this country, a sight like that stirs our soul. So that was the setting. I then also, Paul had often spoken about Kevin, and still does, and I never knew Kevin, but I also knew that Kev had gone into service really just to do his duty. Yeah. And I felt, no, I would like to portray him in this piece to honor him, if I could. So I spoke with Paul, and I asked Paul if that would be all right, and he had some very old Instamatic photographs, and I put the composition together, and I also was able to speak with Bud Cocroft and Cocky Benneker, who advised on the helicopters. At one stage, Bud came in and just took one look, and he said angle, and I got carried away with the angle of the chopper, so I had to correct that.
Yeah, stop there. I think it's time to let's bring in the painting, and I think you just talk with the painting.
Sure. Should we move there then? Or
bring it up.
I can move the table and put the painting in front, if that's better.
Let's just do that. Should we just cut it there, clear?
So this is the painting completed.
You got the helicopters right after you talked to a few of the pilots.
Yeah, but when I eventually got it right, and they came for second inspection, and I got a very gruff, yeah. I felt like I just passed O-level maths. So that was that. Then this is Kev portrayed there, and that was interesting because I was working from these old Instamatic photographs that Paul had given me, and one enabled me to paint Kev quite accurately on a radio, and I painted him in full. And then I remembered from the conversations we had that Kev would never have seen himself as commanding an operation. So I felt that it wasn't honest.
Yeah.
So I painted it immaculate. I scraped it off again, and then painted Kev again in that just sort of patrolling
and
position.
And the other guys that you got here?
So there's an MAG gunner, and it's a stock group, I guess. There's obviously been action down there, and the choppers are probably going back with Fire Force, but I would never pretend for a second that I'm qualified to illustrate or comment on it. I wasn't there.
But they're up on the Zambezi escarpment.
Yeah, but the scene is the Zambezi escarpment,
and they're looking down
and I think for
over the floodplain.
Everyone born in this country or having visited it, it's a place that is very dear.
Yeah, and in a way that is where the war started.
Yeah, I mean,
in the Zambezi Valley that had already
sure.
kicked off the first big contact.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of history there.
Very evocative.
Larry, I know you want to use this to raise money for the old people.
Yeah.
The Mdala Trust, huh?
Yes, so Mdala Trust, we're doing prints of the painting in 3 different sizes, and all the profits from those prints will go to Mdala Trust to help old age pensioners.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I know they need the help.
It's already, the prints seem to be going, which is nice.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, let's hope that that we sell lots more, because those guys at Mdala Trust are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
But thanks, Larry,
Okay.
for your time, and thanks to Paul.
Yeah.